The phrase "you got to get while the getting's good" wasn't created about the NFL draft, but that doesn't mean it doesn't apply to the NFL draft. So what positions can the Packers get while the getting's good?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Go there to get started. One thing I like to do before every draft is to remind myself of what positions have to be drafted early and what positions can wait. And Pro Football Focus did a whole study on this. I'm not going to bog you down in all the data because it is plentiful. But the TLDR for Packers purposes is there are a couple positions that the NFL tends to order correctly or more correctly than others. And it tends to be the premium positions. They're pretty good at ordering tackles. If you want a really good offensive tackle, chances are you got to do it in the first round. You want a really good pass rusher, chances are you got to do it in the first round. You want a really good corner, chances are you got to do it in the first round. You want a really good quarterback, not only chances are you got to do it in the first round, you got to do it in the first 3 to 5 picks. The Packers are the outlier in this. Historically, the outlier. I just went back and looked it up for Caleb Williams purposes. 20.7% chance of getting a 90th percentile player, and that's out of all drafted quarterbacks in the top 3. 20.7. 1 in 5. I said on the show the other day, history says Caleb Williams is probably, in fact, overwhelmingly probably not going to be as good as Jordan Love already is. Despite the fact that he's a borderline generational prospect. It doesn't matter. History says it's probably not going to work. So with that in mind, there are some positions that you have to get early and some positions that you don't. Linebacker is one of them. The NFL tends to be really bad at ordering linebackers. You can get a linebacker in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round. Historically, the outcomes are not much worse, which suggests don't trust your scouting too much. And I know that that is a counterintuitive idea and no NFL front office works this way, but NFL draft picks are risk profiles. And trying to be smarter than history is a great way. And history is littered with this example, not just in the NFL, but in every industry, in every walk of life. Thinking you are smarter than everyone is a great way to fail. Now, some people are. I'm not saying never take a risk. But in the draft, there are ways to make calculated risks. Safety is another one of those positions where the league is just not very good at ordering them historically. They're not very good at deciding this player is better than that player. The same is true at tight end, which is why in the first round, you just don't do it. The same is true interior offensive line. It's frankly one of the reasons why I think the Packers have been so good turning offensive linemen into good players on the interior is because they're just better at identifying the good tackles. And then you say, okay, that guy's a good player, move him to guard. Okay. So for the Packers, that aligns with the conversation we had yesterday on needs. A cornerback, you got to get that guy early. If you think you need a corner, you got to get that guy early. Now, there is the question of positional versatility, of positional value, and the nickel. Yes, it is the case that a nickel is a starting corner, but they're on the field 70% of snaps. A starting boundary corner is on the field, if they're healthy, 99% of snaps or higher. So there's more value in that guy. It's like the difference between a slot-only receiver and a guy who can play the boundary and the slot. There's just more value in that boundary guy, which is why historically the league has said, we don't value those guys in the first round. Brian Branch was an extremely productive college player. He tested kind of mid. I didn't love the tape, but my misgivings about Brian Branch had nothing to do with the way that he tested. I just didn't love the tape. I was wrong. He's awesome, but he's also really a nickel. And so those are day two players. So how the Packers decide to assign value to that spot is going to be interesting to me. It's why a player like Cooper DeJean is so fascinating. Because if he's a boundary corner, he is a no doubt first round pick at 25. If the Packers see him as a sort of nickel safety, someone who can play, if he can play full time next to Xavier McKinney, take him in the first round. If you think he's a big nickel type, someone who's going to play in the slot, play some safety, and only play 60, 70% of snaps, best case scenario, I don't know if that's what you want to use a first round pick on. I think Cooper can play boundary corner for the Packers, but they might not. And that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what I think. The same is true at tackle. In the discussions that we were having yesterday, this idea of a top 10 kind of player. Well, if you're in a position to take a first round tackle, that's what you think they are. That's what you think they have the potential to be. And unless you think Rasheed Walker can be that too, and frankly, I don't. I think Zach Tom can be. I think Rasheed Walker is already a very good player. I think he can become, a really solid upper half of the league kind of player. I just think the physical tools preclude him from ever being, Lane Johnson. I think Zach Tom is a top 5 right tackle tomorrow. So that's the difference in the kind of talent that we're talking about. It doesn't make sense if you're going to take someone in the 4th round. Zach Tom, they hit on them, and David Bakhtiari and TJ Lang and Josh Sitton, and the lineage goes on and on, to be sure. But the expectations of that player are different, right? And so what I wanted to do was try and find the places in this draft that if you want to get a guy at these spots, are there places you have to get to with the understanding that if you want to get a stud at these spots, you have to take them in particular places. And I was looking at the top needs for the Packers in that way. And what complicates this a little is, are the Packers going to take a guard to play guard? Are they going to take a center to play center? Because there are players in this draft, Christian Haynes, Christian Mahogany, Zach Frazier, who might be a guard for some teams, but is a center for most teams, I would think. Are they going to take an interior offensive lineman to play interior offensive line? If they are, to me, they can afford to wait. They can afford to do the Sean Ryan thing and wait till the 3rd round. I didn't look at the positional cliffs there, in part because I think they're going to take a tackle to play guard if they're going to do anything. And so I looked at the big 4 as I see them: corner, tackle, safety, and linebacker, to try and find the sweet spots in this draft for those positions. If you need a guy, where is the cliff? That's what I really wanted to know. Where's the cliff? If I don't get a guy by this time, am I putting myself in a difficult position? So that's what we're going to look at in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. It could be 3 o'clock Lambeau time on Thursday, today, and you may already be out. A team that you picked to go all the way to the end. They might have lost already. And then what are you going to do? Your pool is toast. Your bracket is toast. Well, guess what you can do? You can bet on the games. You can bet on the individual games, every single one. And you don't have to worry all the way to the end. You can make your money right now. You can make your money today and tomorrow and Saturday and Sunday and next weekend. You can start it all over again and have even more fun. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing with America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet winning. This is the perfect time to get on FanDuel if you've been waiting. Don't wait anymore. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, future on who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The reason I started thinking about this was Tyler Nubin, who had a dreadful pro day. Yeah, he's recovering from surgery, but it's been 2 months. And if you're not healthy, don't run. Don't do the things. A relative athletic score in the low 2s. It's not great. It's not great. He's just not a Packer unless he falls to the 4th round. The average Pro Bowl safety had a relative athletic score of 6.81 since 2011. Guys drafted since 2011. Only 3 of the 19 safeties to make a Pro Bowl since 2011 had a relative athletic score below 5. So that's average. And only 1 was as low as Tyler Nubin's, and it was Tyrann Mathieu, who's one of the best collegiate DBs of the last 25 years, and who also, by the way, remember, didn't play. And so was he in ideal shape for all of that? Probably not. But the athletic testing is going to matter. And so I want to take that into account when we're looking at these players. So I went to the athletic consensus board. Now, remember, this is a consensus board. This is not just like Dane Brugler putting things together. This is boards from around the internet. And I looked at the corner. I wanted to find the corner cliff. And boy, is there a corner cliff. So there is this cluster of corners. Terrion Arnold, Quinton Mitchell, Nate Wiggins, 13, 15, 21 on the big board. Probably going to be gone by the time the Packers pick. Cooper DeJean at 25. Kool-Aid McKinstry at 28. Kool-Aid just ran 4.4s, low 4.4s, low to mid, depending on who you ask. There was a report that the scout there, 4.41. Unofficial, 4.46. We'll see if there's an official number by the time that this goes up. You've got Rakestraw Jr. at 35, who is just, unless he blows us away at his pro day, and I haven't seen the numbers, probably not going to be a Packer. And then there's Lassiter from Georgia, who ran, I think, 4.65. You're just not going to be a Packer at corner. You might not be an NFL corner running 4.65. So if Rakestraw and Lassiter are off the board, that leaves Arnold, Mitchell, Wiggins, DeJean, Kool-Aid. At 28 is the last guy on the board. So you might get one of those guys at 25. There is not another corner on the consensus board until 57. Now that's right in range where the Packers pick, but that guy is TJ Tampa, who I would take I would be fine at 25 at 41 all day. I like the day 2 corners a little bit more than consensus because I like Cam Hart. I like Kyrie Jackson better than consensus. But history tells us the further from consensus you stray, the more likely you are to miss. That consensus, it's the old wisdom of the crowds, the consensus tends to be more right than if you go a far afield of it. So the further you go from consensus, the less likely you are to hit on a player, right? So TJ Tampa at 57, if I take him at 25, I'm more likely to miss on him there, which is interesting. People just think he's not as good. Now, it's not like he in a vacuum is any more or less likely to hit based on where he gets drafted, right? But it's if the consensus correctly pegs his risk profile to be 57, then he's more likely to miss than a different player you could have taken at 25. It's about opportunity cost. So there is a clear drop off here, which fits with the way that we think historically about the position. If you want a good corner, you got to take him in the first round. And I'm not worried personally about the nickel part of this. I want to take the best player that I can get. If I'm taking a first round player, I'm just not worried about it. So I'm taking someone that I think can play the boundary tomorrow. And then on day 2, at 88, 91, like Chris Abrams-Drain, the kid from Missouri, or if Max Melton is there, I think he can play in the slot. If Rakestraw is there at 58, maybe I worry less about the athletic profile. We've talked about, everydayers remember, we talked about this idea of maybe going outside their normal athletic profile for a nickel. That's just not going to happen in the first round. It might happen in round 3. That's when the Packers have gotten a little bit more fast and loose with some of this stuff. In round 2, Amari Rodgers was round 2 as well, but Jay Sternberger was round 3. So that is where they could get a little crazy with this, but it looks like corner in the first is your move if someone is there. Now, I'm not saying reach. Personally, I don't think TJ Tampa at 25 is that big a reach. I think he is a borderline first round pick. First, like early second kind of player is how I have him graded. So a late first, totally fine, especially at that corner spot. Like that is a highly valuable position. I like some of the day 2 guys, but there's fewer of them, and even fewer who potentially fit the Packers types. It's Cam Hart, it's Kyrie Jackson, like that's it. Well, can you bank on one of those guys falling to you, and do you feel like you have to reach for one of them at 41 rather than hoping that they make it to 58? Well, that becomes problematic now. Now you've scuttled some of the value proposition here. I don't love that. Now, I'm fine with Kyrie Jackson at 41 because I have him as the 45th best player on my board. So at 41, I'm not that worried about it. TJ Tampa at 41, I'm fine. But the consensus says, that's not how this works. So that it's not everything, but I think this is an interesting way of looking at it. So I did the same thing with offensive tackle. Again, there is a very similar cliff. There's just more players before the cliff. So again, athletic consensus board. Joe Alt at 7. Olu Fashanu at 11. JC Latham at 12. Talisi Fuaga at 14. Could be a guard, could be a tackle, but he's a tackle. Troy Fautanu at 17. Amarius Mims at 19. You've got Tyler Guyton at 24. Graham Barton at 27. And Jordan Morgan at 34. Then the Cliff and Tyler Suamatia from BYU. Another mini kind of cliff. And then there's Paul from Houston. And then not again until 81. So really, the cliff is 34. The cliff is 34. So 25, you got to get your corner because I think that's a bigger need. But if you want to tackle, you probably have to get that guy at either 25 or 41. So for me, it depends on how you view these prospects. If you think, like if let's say Tyler Guyton, who again, 24 on the consensus board, if he's there at 25 and you really like Tyler Guyton, you think he can be a top 10 caliber left tackle. I think he has that sort of upside. The movement skills at that size, rare. Then you go, okay, is there also a corner on the board there? Do you have them graded similarly? What is the delta? And then if you needed to, from 41, if you wanted to come back up, what are you getting? Now, this is where corner versus someone like Graham Barton, who's probably going to play center or guard for you, the corner is just the more valuable position. And again, we know history tells us, don't feel like you have to reach or don't feel like you can feel super confident in your evaluation of an interior offensive lineman, especially when you have to make the adjustment of going from tackle to guard center. It is not an easy adjustment for everyone. And so you can't just say, okay, well, they can just do this. It's fine. No. Now at 41, I think there's a chance that one of this group is there. I like Kingsley Suamatia is someone who I think has more fans than 53. There's some people who think he's a first round player. I think Nate Tice from The Athletic and Yahoo thinks I must have said Suamatia's name wrong the first time. Apologies to him for that. The Packers might think he's better than that. And so 41 makes sense. I don't think that's a huge problem. Like the difference between 41 and 53, we're talking about second round picks. Like, that's not that big a difference. If you're taking, like, 41 is probably someone with a second round grade. 53 is probably someone with a second round grade. So we're arguing apples and, like, it's like Granny Smiths versus Honeycrisp. They're both apples. They might be different colors, but they're both apples. That makes this tricky, though. And so for me, it depends on who that guy is. If Barton is the best available, or it's Jordan Morgan and you think Morgan is a guard for you, then I'm going to go corner if I can. I think there's a good chance that either Cooper DeJean or Kool-Aid McKinstry is there at 25. I'm comfortable with that in either case. And then figuring out what you do. If Graham Barton falls to 41, great. If he doesn't, fine. You can get a guard later. And that's maybe where you have to alter your strategy on, okay, Christian Mahogany is a guard who plays guard. Don't care. Take him. Or Zach Frazier. Jackson Powers Johnson was not in Mel Kiper's most recent mock draft. He talks to NFL people a lot. And Bob McGinn did not have him in his top 55, according to the scout survey. I think draft media might be much higher on Jackson Powers Johnson than the NFL is. Which means if he's there at 41, like, it would be a very Elton Jenkins-y type pick to say, yeah, we don't normally do this. We don't normally take interior offensive linemen to play interior offensive line, but this guy is that good. He's that athletically gifted that we're going to take him to do it. It could make some sense. Now, what about safety? What about linebacker? The problem with these positions is it's not that there's a cliff. There's just not that many good players, which makes it really hard to find value. We're going to talk about it next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. I've started reading in the morning. Just finding 15 minutes, I just want to read one chapter if I can. And it allows me to get centered, to get focused, to start the day, to take my mind and engage with something, but not work something out. I don't have to work out a problem. It's not work. It's not parenting. It's not, any other thing that I'm trying to work out. It's just engaging my brain in a different kind of way. And I like that. Therapy can help you find that thing for you, which is where BetterHelp comes in. Designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. Switch therapists anytime at no additional cost. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And thanks for everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So safety. It's just not a very good position in this draft, made worse by the fact that Cam Kinchins from Miami and Tyler Nubin from Minnesota tested atrociously. Like, really bad. Now, Tyler Nubin, 43 on the consensus board. My guess is if we do this exercise in a week, he will be lower. And I would not be surprised if he was behind Javon Bullard, who's at 54 on the consensus board. Now, there is a nice little cluster at the top of the third round. Jaden Hicks from Washington State, Kalen Bullock from USC, Cam Kinchins from Miami at 76, and Cole Bishop at 88. Middle to starting to get a little late on day two. We're talking about third round kind of picks, late second, early third. That's where you draft safeties. That's where I would want to draft a safety if I could. Now, I think Bullard in the second, I wouldn't love it at 41. I would understand it. especially because I think he can play nickel. I think he can play safety. I think he's a great fit next to Xavier McKinney because he can do a lot of the same things that Xavier McKinney can do. And so they complement each other really nicely in that way because you can play them each anywhere. I don't think he's great as a deep middle, but you've got Xavier McKinney. He can play deep half, but I think he's best near the line of scrimmage. Is he ideally body type wise a strong safety? No. I think he's best as a nickel. Maybe he is your nickel. Just draft him to play nickel and he can play some safety for you. You can disguise some coverages with him. That's worth a second round pick to this team. There isn't really another safety. Now, I like Bo Braid. He's not on this list. I think that's a mistake. But again, I believe in my evaluation, but history says I'm probably wrong. Or I'm more likely to be wrong in my evaluation on him than some of these other players where it fits consensus a little bit better. The wisdom of the crowd just says that's how that works. I think I would take him on day 2, second round, 58, and not worry about it. I think he's good enough to do that. I think athletically he's good enough. I think structurally he's good enough. He's someone I really like. And then Dadrian Taylor-Demerson is not on this list. Again, someone I think at 88 if he's there, no brainer. 91 if he's there, no brainer. Even 58, I wouldn't be that surprised. And so I like some guys that are not on this list, but there is no guy early. Like I posted about Tyler Newman and someone was like, oh, well, I guess you got to get someone in the first round because, it falls off such a cliff. Well, no. The cliff is like the position. There is no one worth a top 50 pick, really. And so that becomes problematic. How are you going to find that guy? Well, you probably have to wait. Well, that's okay. That's okay. Because then someone like Cam Kinchin's like, if you're taking him at 88 or 91, that's so much better value than at 41. You're taking a different level of risk because you're using a different amount of capital. That's a good allocation of resources. His tape says he's a second round pick. The athletic profile says he is a day 3 flyer. You got to find something somewhere in the middle. There is a place where I don't think athletic testing should ever drop a player more than like a full round. And I generally only do it about a half round based on what I see. Now, if you're someone who is, I'm like, okay, I wonder what the athleticism says on tape, like in my tape study, and then they test like crap, I'm like, okay, might be a full round. Like that it might be that big an issue. Like, Kamar Lassiter. What is the deep speed? I wondered about that. Only ran 4.65. Jaden Hicks. What is the speed? He didn't even run. He ran great agilities. Didn't run. I think he runs probably a 4.7, 4.68 at best. Well, then you're not a safety. You're a linebacker. And a slow linebacker. Like not a fast one. Speeded, like weight adjusted. A really slow linebacker. But normal linebacker like 4.7 would be fine. But not if you're 215. That's problematic. Speaking of linebacker, there is Edgerrin Cooper at 39, Peyton Wilson at 41, and Junior Colson at 50. That is your first little tier. None of those guys at 41 is that interesting to me. I like Cooper fine, but I think 41 is a reach, and this goes back to our thing about historical precedents. History says the NFL is bad at ordering linebackers, so don't believe you can beat history. Wait. If they're there at 51, great. If they're not, who cares? Who cares? That is my official position on it. And I actually kind of like Jeremiah Trotter and Cedric Gray better anyway later on day 2. Like if you can get one of those guys at 88, 91, great. They're third round players to me. That's where I like them. And so, if you can, that's right where I have them graded. I think Peyton Wilson is going to get overdrafted. I think Jeremiah Trotter is going to be underdrafted. And so if you're going to pick one of the two, it's pretty obvious what you want to be. 25 and 41, I don't want a linebacker. I just don't. 58 is when you start having the conversation about a linebacker. And to me, the only one that I'm even thinking about drafting is Edgerrin Cooper. Because of the athletic profile, because of the defined skill set. He can be a pass rusher tomorrow, a blitzer, someone who comes downhill and makes plays in the run game. He shows up with force. I like that. The rest of these guys are late day 2 guys. And it just looks like 58 is going to be the flyer spot. 25-41, you got to go corner offensive line, I think, if you can. 88-91, that's where you, if you can, go linebacker safety. And that makes 58 the wild card spot. What can you get? Malachi Corley, receiver. Another corner. Is that where you go Max Melton? Get your slot? Do you use it to trade up? Do you take 58 and 41 and move up? Do you take 58 and 25 and move up to get Cooper DeJean? I would do that. I would consider that. The Packers have 11 draft picks. They don't have room on their roster for 11 players. I'm packaging some picks to move up. We're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about that tomorrow. That is what we call a tease. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook, Locked On Packers. Like us on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Or subscribe on Instagram, Locked On Packers. On YouTube, Locked On Packers. On TikTok, Locked On Packers. So you can stay Locked On Packers.